Welcome back to another episode of Life Sci AI, the podcast series. In this episode, we are joined by the CEO and founder of Tirona. Tirona is a startup based in the Netherlands. They have 3 products and have been going since 2014. And we are joined by Eva van Rikxoort. So thank you very much for joining us. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
It's pretty impressive for non-Dutch.
My pronunciation of Dutch names gets better and better each time, the more that I speak with you guys. So it's a pleasure to have you on. Please introduce yourself in a little bit more detail to everyone listening and watching.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Eva. I founded indeed Tirona in 2014, and Tirona is a medical AI company, and we focus on making software products for medical image analysis, which means if a physician, like a radiologist, but also a pulmonologist, for example, reads an image, we make software that helps them in their job. So we make software that makes it easier to diagnose a disease, that makes it easier to plan a treatment or to know how to follow up with a patient. And we do this with a focus on lung diseases. That's because I have a background in science and I always focused on the lungs, and I like working on lungs because with lungs, you cannot just take out your lung and see what's going on. You really have to do it with imaging. For example, if you work on breast cancer, you also do it mostly with imaging, but in the end, you can take it out. With the lung, you die if you do that, right? So that's the reason for imaging and lungs. And actually the reason for starting Tirona, because I had a scientific career in the Netherlands, in US, and I realized a lot more is possible than what actually reaches the patients or even the pharma companies when they make drugs. So there's a lot of things invented in science, and when you're a scientist, a lot of people are asking you, physicians, can I use the software that you describe in this paper or that you made? And the answer is usually no, because you don't have time. You have to work on your scientific career, and you can't put it directly into use. So the original start of Tirona was, let's bridge the gap between what's possible in science and what actually reaches patients. That's how we started.
Yeah, so definitely just closing the gap really between what's on the research side and actually in the implementation piece of it. So actually, when we speak to a lot of people who are postdocs in that sort of principal researcher stage, who want to move into industry for that exact reason.
Mm-hmm.
What's different about you, Eva? Why did you think, instead of joining a company, I'm going to start one? What's different? How are you made a little bit differently?
I think, well, also times were maybe different in 2014, but I moved also from the Netherlands to the US, and there I worked for an academic group where there was also a spin out. And the spin out was not a software company, it was actually a CRO, so a company that helps pharma companies run projects. But I got a little bit of taste of, I have an idea what I would like. So I think it's maybe personality. It's also, we had, as a scientist, already like starting customers. So the idea was, I want this software that I've made with a group in my career, and I know who wants to use it. So, and there's no company that directly does this. So honestly, it was more like let's try, and then we do exactly what we want. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I see. It's very organic in the growth, and that's going to be, I think, a theme of this. It's sort of how you guys have grown. It's been very organically. But now, if you were to look back, I don't know if you had some perceptions of what it would be like leading a company. Has it met your expectations, or has there been things that are very different to how you thought it would go?
It's completely different. I mean, when I describe sometimes in talks for entrepreneurs, for example, like how was the road of Tirona from 2014 with 1.5 person to now with 40+%, you can make this beautiful story. But of course, everything was so different. I think, honestly, in reality, it's much nicer than I expected, but it's really a journey of learning from mistakes. That's what it is. I love it. It's also much more dynamic than when I was a scientist. But as I expected, no, I don't think I knew what to expect. I think no one knows what to do it. And
yeah, no, for sure. What's your role in the company now? What's sort of your day to day? Are you very much involved with the research and the roadmaps still, or are you sort of more relationship based around the external customers that you have?
Yeah, it evolved a lot. So indeed, that right now, so I'm the CEO, and in the beginning, I was like as much programming as any other person in the company, but slowly, that's not so. I honestly, I know what we make. I still know a lot of the medical knowledge, but I have no idea. I wouldn't be able to explain you what a single line of code of Tirona does. So yeah, I'm now much more in managing the company, but also the relations. And that's really that was also one of the big processes, especially as a founding scientist, letting go of that baby you created. Is a big step. I think now it's we have other people managing that, so and that feels good.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And going into the products then of Tirona, you have 3 major products at the moment, right? Since 2014. So take us through each one and a bit of on a top level piece, let's say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so the main focus of Tirona is on chest, so the lungs, mostly lung diseases. And there we have our main product is a product that analyzes chest CT scans. And the focus is a little bit different than most other companies. So because you would think if you make imaging, you work for radiologists, or you make software that's meant to make radiologists' life easier. Somehow our software does that, but our software is really focused on treatments. So if you are a treating physician and because we come from clinical trials, if you do a certain treatment, the software helps you select which patient can have this treatment or should have another treatment. What happens if you treat? Is the patient getting better? So we really make software that helps in treating a patient. So not so much in reducing workload for radiologists, but helping to plan treatments, for example.
Just on that though, how is that set up differently then? If you were to sort of do a compare and contrast, people listening to this will be familiar with the diagnostic tools for imaging. So how is it different when you're talking about treatments?
Yeah, so diagnostics, indeed, you can say, okay, we have diagnostic products like COVID. Yeah. That's, I think, an easy example. That product says, here's a CT scan, what's the chance that someone has COVID and how much we're in the lung. But our core software says, here's a scan of a patient with a known disease, but here's a set of treatments. Which treatment would fit this patient best? Or after a patient is treated and we know what the treatment was, what effect did the treatment have, and is that the effect you're looking for? And that's all because when you normally have you have a lung disease, the only thing you can do is like blow in a pipe and say, oh, you blow out more or less air, and it's a bit more advanced. But with the imaging, you can see exactly what's going on and what's happening and personalize what's going to happen to the patient.
Oh, I see. So it's more like long-term analysis, and then you're creating comparison trends on based on that.
Yeah, so it's very close to diagnostic imaging. It's you're still finding the disease and you're still saying how much is where, but it's almost for screening versus not. You already know what disease the patient has. Not we can do that, but that's generally also not really in our space what they need. We know a patient has cystic fibrosis, for example. You're just helping to map out what's happening to this patient. Are they getting worse? Are they getting better? Is the treatment working? Should they change treatment? So it's a different focus.
I see. Okay. And then so sorry for jumping in or explanation. So I just wanted to outline there if there was a major difference. So you have 3 all around the lungs, right?
Yeah, so we also in the lungs we also do X-ray imaging, but that product is pretty special. It's called CAT4TB, and it's not aimed at the Western world. It's for developing countries. So there's still a lot of tuberculosis going around, of course, in developing countries, and the aim is to eradicate that. But the only way to do that is to find people who have it and treat them with antibiotics, and there are no physicians there. Right? Yeah. So together with Delft, another Dutch company, we have developed AI that with an X-ray triage as soon as in seconds when people come to a screening. Is there a chance you have TB? You get a genetic test. If not, you're good to go. I think it's not useful in the Netherlands, US, UK, whatever. There's not real tuberculosis here, but it's really aimed at developing countries, making it possible there to do something with a medical image. So it's a triage tool. And yeah, we have a third product. It's a startup in our scale up. It's for retinal imaging. So there we are aiming at preventing blindness. So if you're screened because you have diabetes, for example, and very quickly we can say, hey, should you go to a treating physician, or you have no signs yet of any disease, so continue and come back in 2 years.
Yeah, no, for sure. Okay, what was the thought process behind the retinal piece? Slightly different to the lung, you know, it's a little bit away from what you guys have been doing, and your career especially. Was there someone who's come in and gone, right, we need to do retinal now?
Yeah, that's like how we matured as a company. So the first idea was not that we would only do lungs. We thought, hey, technically we know how to make many products. We are going to make a platform, and underwater all the software has the same technological background, and we can spin off many things. So indeed, someone came, did a Ph.D. in retina, had an idea, sure, it fits, and we kept retina because we believe in it. But we also learned focus is very important, because yes, technically making the products is one thing, but serving the market and the market needs and really tailoring it, you cannot do that for 20 applications. So lesson learned. But retina, it is a good idea. So we're keeping it in, but it basically really diverges from lung.
Absolutely, and the focus piece is really interesting, because we had the exact same conversation with Oliver Armitage from Bios Health, who's the co-founder there, and they have so many different applications about what they could do with their technology. And he learns all the time about people coming to him and going, that tech, we could use it for X, Y, and Z, and I've not considered it for mental health or for this or for that. And he's like, we need to focus on our cardiovascular piece, and then maybe we can create a platform. So I think that's probably a common thread, because what you guys do is so amazing and has so many different applications, but actually most important is doing something and doing it really, really well, and being known for that. So will you keep these 3 products now, or is that going to be your guys' piece in the market?
Yeah, I think so. Lung is the main focus, so that the CAT for TB and chest CT products are, because it's both lung. It's 2 products because it has very different. But in the end, the knowledge is the same. So the retina product, we will keep it, but in the company, it has very different pathway. We have a very different background. And indeed, the focus, and it's not only focus on making the best product, but what does the customer want? And it's a different customer. So that, it's a lesson learned pretty quickly, but lesson learned.
And before we go into that, and we can probably look at, you know, the difference in customers and the relationships between the chest X-ray product and how you came about with Tirona and the retina products. Before that, I just want to delve into the developing piece and the tuberculosis, because it's probably something that a lot of the listeners and watchers don't really consider is still a problem, especially in the developing world. So I guess when you're creating a product and you're partnering with Delft, and you know, Delft Imaging, they go out there with their trucks to where they're places where no physicians, I guess, what are the restrictions for having an AI-powered solution that is cutting-edge technology, and it has to go and work where there is no infrastructure, like nothing there at all? How do you do that?
I think it's actually it's also part of the fun of the product. So indeed, we make the AI. It has restrictions in the sense of it. So we also make the infrastructure for the imaging, not for the rest. So indeed, it has restrictions on how much memory can it use, how fast does it need to be. So it's a very different ball game. Of course, you have to be very careful. You're going through a lot of different countries. So also for which populations does it work? Be very careful about that. We also say if it's a population that we are not sure we covered, first do a test and otherwise update. So you have a lot of restrictions, and I think it's also, so for example, we all go to cloud, but we're driving around in a truck in Africa. There's not even power, let alone. We have had to make a solution where our cloud system is downloaded on a small box computer, and the software has to run, the infrastructure, the databasing. If it's once it's connected to the internet, sync for backup.
Yeah.
So it's challenging in a different way.
Yeah.
But I think it gives a lot of purpose to what we do. Because it really is a product that's endorsed by WHO, that's used 5,000 times a day. I think for an AI product to be used in real life 5,000 times a day is amazing. It's also amazing to work on, and that's also in the end giving us a lot of experience. What happens when an AI product is actually used on a very large scale? So that helps Tirona also for the developed countries in the end a lot, because we already know what happens when you start full force using a product. So it has a lot of challenges, but a lot of lessons also. Yeah,
so I imagine that then feeds into the development of the other products.
Yeah.
Because you, like you said, it's very rare that you have this amount of data and the wide usage of and the nuances and the differences. But why and when did this partnership come about? And because I can't imagine you waking up one day and go, right, let's try and diagnose tuberculosis across the world.
No, that's actually can make a beautiful story for myself about it, because actually, so Guido, the owner of Delft Imaging Systems, was already working with the university we are spin out of, and they already had the idea, we have to make AI and make this tuberculosis screening possible. But it was developed inside a university hospital. So we started Tirona in 2014, and at some point Delft Imaging Systems said, yeah, keeping that in a university is a risk. It also, it needs to be, we want it certified, we want it professional, we want it, adaptations have to be quick, and we want the company to talk to. And that's when we put it from the university in Tirona. By now, the product is, of course, 20 times different than it was then, but the original idea is really Delft Imaging, and we are the AI power behind it.
Yeah. Okay. And then going into sort of the conception really, and how you guys have started is different to a lot of other companies. You're very unique and very lucky, I would say, in being clinical trial led from the very start. So I guess if you wanted to give everybody an understanding of what that means, and what the effect has been on your development as well.
Yeah, I think indeed. So maybe to explain the clinical trial part, because we come from research, and actually because I used to work in academia and then partly in a CRO where we're as a project lead with pharma companies, I knew how they do research to medications and what imaging role there is or could be. I think that's it. It's more a vision at that time. So when we started Tirona, we knew we have all this knowledge that where we can really help. Hey, if you are a biotech company or pharma company and you're investigating lung diseases, we can help you. What's happening in your patients? Which patients is it working? Which patients is it not? So Tirona started to build a model around, we are the experts. We help you as another company when you're developing a treatment. Which patient should you treat from the imaging? What's actually happening in the patient? A lot of times, actually, I think became so successful because the conception visually of what was happening is not what we were seeing with AI. We were really able to help, and I think the business concept around it is unique, but also interesting, because in the end, making a business in medical AI is very difficult because you're dealing with hospitals. Who is going to pay? Each country is different, but the trial part is a business to business part. So it's one company dealing with another company, and there, it's a little bit easier business model. And in the end, we are the partner that starts from inception. Hey, you're making a treatment. How do we do the imaging? All the way to the treatment is approved. It's now in the clinic, and we are offering your physicians that are using the treatment the same software, or the clinically approved software, to actually use your treatment. And we have done that path. And I think that's the way we grew. It's also maturity. We didn't foresee this completely at the beginning. But that's, I think, the unique way for us, because we are also with the ChatGPT product, we are live. There are over 400 hospitals using our software on a daily basis, and we get paid for it. And that I think is because we come in not at the front at radiology saying, hey, we can reduce your workload, but we come in at the back, let's say, from the treating physician saying, for us to be able to treat, we need this and this done on the scan. So it's a very different way of getting into the hospital. It's very expert level. So it's not something you can start today and do tomorrow. But from where we come from, it's a logical way to work.
No, it makes perfect sense. It seems like you said, naturally it's grown in that direction from yourselves. I guess when did you go live in your first hospital? When did you make the transition from going for B2B maybe into more B2C with it?
That's actually already happened in 2016. So we started 2014. But we had some customers in mind where we thought this could happen. And one of them, we were able to start a partnership. At that time, we were 3 people. We had no clinical approval, no regulatory approval whatsoever. We had software trial experience and an ID. And they partnered up with us and said, hey, if we did some analysis work on their trials retrospectively. And if you're able to get the regulatory clearance by then and then for this product, we're going to the market together. And we did. So I think it's very unique. Also, we got, of course, we did a lot of work for it, but it's also luck somehow. Everything is, we found the company that we wanted to work with. Yeah, they took a chance. I worked with this 3-person company to make this happen.
It's never luck. It's preparation meets opportunity.
I only know in Dutch how to say it, but I always say, it seems like there's a lot of luck, but also you make the luck happen, right?
For sure, definitely. But how does the way that you guys work and your path to revenue, let's say, how does that affect your development pipelines, your research roadmap when you're thinking about it? Because I guess it's probably a little bit different to other companies.
Yes, it's actually very challenging because we're that company that makes huge roadmaps and then never keeps them, because it's very dynamic. So because we're growing so much now, we're actually right now more than 40 employees. It's getting a bit better, but because we know we also have clinical products, right? Like purely clinical. So those are products that you can really map out. The next release in 6 months has A, B, and C. But then we have the trial business where, hey, there's a new trial. They want this and this. We don't have it yet. We think we can make it. And then it's always, okay, we need some resources on that. It's a very dynamic world. We found a good way to deal with it, to be able to keep our promises on what is definitely in the product for the customers that we have clinically. And there's a lot of flexibility. So many roadmaps are only 6 weeks compared to the 6-month roadmaps we have for CE releases, for example. But it's very dynamic. And it's now that we're growing so much and we have customers that we're actually starting to say no to, it's difficult, but I think it's also a maturity point. There are things that when we say, no, this is an over ask, or this is, we can't fit that in anymore. But it's very dynamic.
Yeah. Was it like a proud moment when you say, actually, we haven't got enough capacity for this? Or was that quite challenging to do for you? Were you like,
for like the startup you come from, because we did everything indeed organically with customers. So everything was funded by ourselves by doing work. You never said no, basically. So it was, on one hand, it was a proud moment looking back, but it was a very painful moment when it happened, because, and we were warned about that when we were growing, and of course we have advisors and everything. They said, this moment is coming, it's going to hurt, but in the end, it's the sign that you're really there. So it's all, you keep learning when you start a company.
Yeah, for sure. And so if you're looking at that for the long piece, then very much relationship led, clinical trial led. The retina was a little bit different. So how did that experience compare, and what were your biggest learns between the two?
Yeah, honestly, I think we could have learned more between the two sometimes, because we sometimes make the same mistakes. Retina is very different. There we're in the screening world, so it's much more of a high volume game than what we're doing. And it's much less of we are the experts that help you make things better or possible. It's much more, it's the same as the radiology game, basically. We make it possible to screen so many people at the high volume without burdening the physicians. That's what the pitch is. We learned, of course, we learned everything, but sales-wise, we basically learned it's so different. Because who is going to pay for it is different. The customer journey is different. Our value proposition is different. So yeah, honestly, but the only thing we did learn is indeed it is okay to say no if it doesn't fit.
Yeah,
that we learned a bit earlier than with chest.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then if you're looking then at the future and what you guys will be moving forward, what are your main aims in the next 6 to 12 months in the shorter term, and where do you think your products and then either extra products that you'll have will be in the next 2 or 3 years? If you can see that, it's probably going to change. Like you said, it's very dynamic.
Yeah, I think so. We have a pretty clear focus. We have last year with COVID and everything that happened around it, also for us, the change in products we had because of COVID made us rethink, but in the end we're back on the same track we were a year ago. So the main goal is excel at the trials, make more pathways all the way from trial into clinic, so more ways we can get into clinics with treating physicians. For example, we have focused on pulmonology a lot, so the lung physicians, but actually surgeons that do thoracic surgery are our next main target because it fits really well in the proposal. So expand the clinical presence. I think that's the main message, but we do it through our own pathway. I think that's the goal. And also, if you look at a much longer term, yes, of course, the goal is that in every hospital, in every CT scan, you have to use our software to be able to, as a radiologist, to give good service to your treating physicians. And retina, yeah, then there's the goal. And in the end, I think it might be two different entities that are both Tirona, but they are just so different. But there, yeah, we want to be the screening partner. And about other applications, maybe, yeah, I think so in a few years, but in a smarter way. So for example, we're already looking at, okay, you have a chest CT scan, but usually it has the abdomen on it as well. So it's a logical expansion because it's the same scan, it's the same expertise, it's the same customers. So let's expand, let's expand there to different diseases instead of the brain. That wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. So like different diseases within the same scan would make sense.
I think that's not based on what you technically can do. It's based on the customer journeys you have to understand. It's the same customers.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and like you said, I think everything that you said has been insightful in the fact that you're listening. It's a listen and right, let's try and solve your problem rather than going with a solution and trying to find a problem for that solution.
Yeah.
It's a problem solving exercise for you guys. But in the last piece of this episode, I wanted to really touch on the amazing, I don't know if it's an achievement. I don't know if that's the right word to say, but you have a really strong business in terms of diversity and in terms of female representation in both the top leadership positions, but also the actual engineers in itself, more than most companies in this space and more than other industries, especially within AI and especially with tech. So I guess to start off this conversation, I'll sort of throw it onto you. And was this something that was considered early on? Were you thinking about, right, let's try and put some key parameters in place to achieve this? Or is this something that it's just naturally grown through?
I think it started naturally. Of course, for example, if you look at women, being a woman makes it more natural to hire women as well. But it became more of a focus point because I realized, of course, there are so many men in the MT layer. And I realized at some point when they're hiring people and I was not so involved anymore, and they told me, yeah, we interviewed 6 people and they scored them nicely. And they were going to hire 4 men. I said, but there's a woman there who scored higher. What's going on? It's an unconscious process. where that's so now there's a little bit more focus. And I think the other thing that we have been very careful about is that once you have women and men in, women just communicate differently. So yeah, there's a bit of it was a conscious choice to sometimes say let's push a woman up, because even though she's not so vocal, she does have all the potential. And that's how we indeed, one of our lead software engineers is a woman. And that I think that's because of being conscious about it. If we would just have listened like look and who screams loudest, it would not be a woman. So I think you have to be conscious, and it helps to have women in the top layers to be conscious about it. And then of course nationalities, because we are 40 people, but it's I mean there are more non-Dutch than Dutch, and I think it's now 14 nationalities or something that we have. I think that's also natural because we already started out with different nationalities, and we like it because also our customers are all over the world. So it also when we have a Japanese customer, for example, right now we pull in a Japanese colleague and also you learn a lot from each other, and honestly also a lot of tech expertise. Yeah, it's all over the world, and you have to get it where you can get it. But once you have the diverse team, it also and you put up a diverse team of people in charge of hiring people. It's not a conscious effort. Sometimes it's a conscious effort to hire a Dutch person.
To go the other way. Yeah. No, it makes sense. Like, because there's an old saying of diversity breeds more diversity.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a circle. It just comes full circle. But starting with that is very challenging. But I think you're absolutely right in people who have shared experiences and can see, you know, that maybe women communicate differently to men, or different nationalities communicate differently and share their voices and have a different way of solving problems to other nationalities. Sometimes it can only take a person with that experience to recognize that, for sure. So what would you say if somebody is listening to this who is looking to affect change in their business and going, I'm struggling to spot this in my business? Are there certain things that you can suggest to put in place or to really look out for with these things?
I think so. If indeed if a company is not diverse at all yet, so I have no experience with it. I can feel that's going to be difficult because it's very hard to look at another perspective. I think once you have a little bit of diversity, the key, at least for us, was to make the people that do the interviews and that are responsible for selecting the CVs, make that diverse. Because we, for example, sometimes look at CVs and we have no idea if something is a good university or the company they worked for. And then the people from those countries say, oh yeah, but that's in our country, that's top. Or and some lesson we learned pretty harsh, but we are also Dutch, so Dutch is a bit forward. Hierarchy is not really a thing. I mean, it doesn't matter, everyone talks to each other at the same level. So for us, it was in the beginning really hard to realize why people were not performing as we expected. And then we just asked them, hey, we expected A and B, we think you actually can do it, but and then the reason was that they said, yeah, but in the hierarchy, I don't have I can't do that. That's not in my mandate, my power. And for us, that was a huge surprise, but a huge lesson that not everyone functions the way we do, and people become unhappy because they don't know what's expected, and we expect something. So I think it is an open communication thing to make it work in the end.
Yeah, it's about empowerment then.
Yeah, that's, at least in the Dutch setting, that's the lesson we learned. We sometimes we're so not used to hierarchy, and we so much appreciate initiative. But for other cultures, that can be very difficult because that's not appreciated. And the open dialogue about it really helped people. They really still say, they still sometimes have to get used to it, even though they work for us for 5 years. It keeps being a dialogue because it's so against their nature.
Yeah, for sure. And going back to sort of women in tech or in AI, are there communities and networks which you utilize or have utilized in the past?
Honestly, myself, no. I always feel a bit I have done I have been sent to courses when I was still a scientist, for example, women in science, how do you deal with men? I unconsciously learned a lot from that, but I've never really felt the I'm a woman, so it's different. Only now that we are a growing company, I see indeed that unconsciously, for example, in meetings, when people are like grabbing opportunities, it's always the women who see the problems that are actually there, and this sounds a bit bad, but it's often the men that are like, oh, no problem, and unconsciously you think, okay, they're gonna solve this. But so I learned a lot from these kind of communities, but honestly, I'm not in them.
No, makes sense. So I guess it's been learned behavior, like you've just observed really. As you've grown, there is a slight difference now, and that you don't want to have an environment where there isn't that empowerment, the open dialogue. So you guys have put in place a culture and an environment to make sure that the right areas are fostered, from going back to when you were like a 2, 3, 4 person company, so that when you get at 40, when you get to 60, it's almost the same as best you can. It won't be, but it'll be close to as best you can. Is that kind of the thought process?
Exactly. And I think that the lesson is, once you're diverse, include the diversity in any growth. So if you want to empower women to climb, make sure there are women in whatever committees. When you talk about it, make sure you hear them. I think that's and it's a bit easier because, of course, I'm a woman. Sometimes that makes that. I think it's a huge difference if the top level is only men, not because they're not willing, and it's not at all that. It's because sometimes it's just really hard to realize what's going on.
And sometimes, I guess, if you're a woman and you're looking up and just seeing men as your superiors, it can be quite challenging so some people might find it challenging to even raise their voice and go, previously it's not been heard before, like why is it going to be heard this time? So
indeed. And I think also, for example, I had children. Well, Tirona was already growing, and I made it unconsciously. I realized I'm making a big point out of, for example, pumping milk at work and taking time for that. I mean, it's a normal thing, but I made it almost extra visible. Because it has to be an example that for the women, that it's okay to have a private life and to work less because you have children and still be there. I noticed that unconsciously I'm doing a little bit of extra effort sometimes to empower women.
No, for sure. So the extra imaging and the extra, the extra piece to say it's okay to this is a natural thing. So you're a mother, this is something that happens for every woman.
Exactly. And it's okay if you don't work full time and still have a career, and it's okay if you have to leave at 4 and pick up your kids and do some work in the evening. It's not even an issue.
It's something that I'm really passionate about, because my mum is an accountant, and so she's in a very male-dominated world in accountancy, and she brought me and my sister up on her own. So she was coming back at like 3 o'clock to pick us up from school, and then doing work in the evenings and stuff. So it's a passion of mine as well. And what you guys are doing, it seems to be strong, not just in life sciences, not just in AI, but it seems of tech, full stop. And something that I would urge anybody, if you wanted to speak to you, I would imagine you would look to help them if you can. But I really enjoyed today. This morning is what we're recording on. So I don't know if there's anything you would like to add to the discussion, or anything you thought of that you would like to sort of finish with.
No, I think it was a nice discussion. I think the focus indeed on your culture and your company to be able to grow, at least as we did organically, it's sometimes forgotten, but I think it's very nice that we touched on it, because it's key for me.
Yeah, for sure. And organically seems to always be the best way to grow. Anyway, it makes you very strong in your foundations. So thank you very much for your time. If people do want to follow up with you, what is the best way for you? Because I imagine there's going to be some discussions after this.
I think email is always the best. We have like a general email address, info@tirona.eu. It's on the website. Because then at least we're also sure that if it's not only in my mailbox, but it's in the general mailbox, I really like follow-up. So
yeah. Awesome, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Bye.